Supreme Court today ruled that abortion is completely a private matter to be decided by mother and doctor in the first 3 months of pregnancy.
In a male-dominated world, women have been trapped in an everlasting battle for their freedoms and rights. For over a century, women have fought to demonstrate their equal value to men. From the women's liberation movement to the modern feminists protesting the present social structure, women in the past century have progressively used their voice to further the case of equality. In the midst of the women's movement, the 1973 Supreme Court case, Roe v. Wade, triumphantly brought women freedom and control over their own bodies, while sparking a nationwide debate over the morality of abortion. Throughout the 1900s, ideas about women and their sexuality began to shift. The ideology that sex was for more than just procreation and could also be for a woman's pleasure came to surface. From this new principle spreaded the belief that birth control could help liberate women. Margaret Sanger, one of the first advocates for birth control, began informing women about different types of contraceptives. In 1921, Sanger founded the American Birth Control League, which eventually transformed into the Planned Parenthood Federation. Looking for a more effective form of contraception, in the 1950s, Sanger began research to create the first birth control pill, raising $150,000 for its development. This led to the creation and approval by the Food and Drug Administration of Enovid, the first oral contraceptive. With the stigma surrounding birth control, American society began to question whether or not the government should have a voice in people's private sexual relationships. Highlighting this controversy was the Supreme Court case of Griswold v. Connecticut in 1963. The ultimate decision found that a couple has the right to use contraceptives provided by one's right to privacy. Although the right to privacy is not a clearly specified right, the court found it as an important value connected to the Bill of Rights. This case set a precedent for the legalization of abortion 2 decades later. Throughout this time, the United States government made strides to further equality between women and men in the workplace. A large leap was made with the Equal Pay Act of 1963, making wage discrimination on the basis of sex illegal. This is a significant piece of legislation acknowledging a woman's contribution in the workplace is equal to that of a man's. Feminists, like Betty Friedan and her best-selling book, The Feminine Mystique, began to unveil the oppression women faced in everyday life. They pushed for acceptance of the idea that they had capabilities equal to those of men, and rather than waiting for men to make a change, women decided that they themselves would have to expand their own opportunities.
Electing to office not the best man any longer. This will be the last election when women are going to choose between the best of 2 men to represent them. We are going to be running ourselves and electing ourselves so that it will not...
Since the late 1800s, every state had enacted laws making abortion illegal. Nonetheless, this did not stop women from taking the termination of unwanted pregnancies into their own hands. Women turned to back alley procedures, which would be the tragic cause of death of 2,700 women in 1930 alone. Back alley abortions disproportionately affected the lower class and minorities. With no legal right to choose, women faced the dark reality of the possibility of death or a child that they could not or had no desire to care for. In 1970, Jane Roe, a pseudonym used by Norma McCorvey, sued the District Attorney of Texas, Henry Wade, for the state's restrictions on abortion unless it was to save a woman's life. Roe asserted that the criminalization of abortion was unconstitutional, violating a woman's right to privacy and the 14th Amendment. The Texas law violated the Due Process Clause of the amendment, stating, "Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law." The state could not regulate one's rights, such as privacy, unless there is compelling state interest. Furthermore, the Ninth Amendment protects rights not enumerated in the Constitution, such as the right to privacy. With the final ruling being 7-2 in the famous case of Roe v. Wade, the court came to the conclusion that only after the first trimester can a state regulate a woman's pregnancy. The court regarded the end of the first trimester as the time when the fetus is viable and capable of life outside of the womb.
The Supreme Court today legalized abortions. The majority in cases from Texas and Georgia said that the decision to end a pregnancy during the first 3 months belongs to the woman and her doctor, not the government. Thus, the anti-abortion laws of 46 states were rendered unconstitutional.
Not only did this case define a constitutional right, but it also brought to light the dark reality that many women face. The legalization of abortion can be seen as a public health triumph. When it became legal in New York in 1971, maternal mortality rate dropped by 45%. Although many saw this development as a triumph for the move towards gender equality, some were angered, considering it to be a tragic moral loss. The rise of conservatism saw the new-found decision as an attack on traditional and moral values. Roman Catholics and pro-life supporters rose up to spread the belief that life begins at conception. The heated argument about abortion quickly shifted away from the right to privacy. Public emotion took over, shaping the debate from a battle of legality to one of morality. Pro-life advocates saw it as an attack on the traditional role of women as wives and mothers, giving them a new power to avoid their female duties as a parent. From this controversy, the Right to Life movement empowered groups such as the National Right to Life Committee to become more active. Founded in 1968, the NRLC is the oldest pro-life organization with representation in every state and over 3,000 local chapters. The committee consistently organizes marches and protests on both a local and national level, along with providing education for their cause, creating a large pro-life influence throughout the country. Out of this new wave of conservatism rose the opposition of important equal rights legislation. In 1972, the Equal Rights Amendment proposed that equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on the account of sex. The amendment was never passed, primarily due to the work of Phyllis Schlafly, a strong believer in traditional values, specifically in regards to the role of women. She viewed the ERA as an attack on women's unique privileges. Schlafly established the Stop ERA organization, which later transformed into the Equal Forum to protest the amendment, resulting in the legislation being set aside even to this day. After Roe v. Wade, states began pushing through legislation that limited women's access to and restricted when one could get an abortion. The most serious threat to Roe was the case of Planned Parenthood of southeastern Pennsylvania v. Casey, in which Pennsylvania passed a law restricting women's access to abortion. It consisted of legally requiring the doctor to inform the patient of the nature of the procedure, development of the fetus, and inform them of the option of adoption. Furthermore, it required a 24-hour waiting period, a signed form indicating the husband was aware of the procedure, and that any minor have the consent of a parent before the procedure was carried out. Upon the case's arrival at Supreme Court in 1992, the administration of George H.W. Bush sided with the state's law and encouraged the justices to use this as an opportunity to overturn Roe v. Wade. After 2 months, the court, in a 5-4 decision, found the provisions, other than the spousal notification, to be legal, but reaffirmed the right to an abortion. To this point, this case has been the most significant challenge to Roe v. Wade. Yet today, this debate is still raging. Protests against abortion are still prevalent, as seen with the annual March for Life. Furthermore, daily picketing occurs at clinics across the nation, encouraging women to rethink their choice in having an abortion. More than just a divide between pro-choice and pro-lifers, a political divide has been made on the subject matter. Moral issues, such as abortion, tend to form one's political affiliation. From this, Republicans and Democrats, in most cases, have taken strong stances on opposing sides of the matter. Nonetheless, whatever stance one takes, someone's life is on the line. When it comes to the abortion debate, many view it from a very personal stance. Yet if one discusses the matter, they can see that it is much more complex than most believe. Women who have gone through this specific experience have numerous opinions themselves about having the procedure. There are many factors one must consider when making such a life-changing decision. As with every moral debate, this dispute is not black and white. There is no right and there is no wrong. The heated controversy falls into a very gray area, one that cannot be defined by a single person or a single case. Supreme Court has so far found that every woman deserves the right to choose what she thinks is best for herself. Throughout history, we have seen that women will find a way to have an abortion whether or not it is safe or legal. The way our government is structured, the highest court of the land is the one to decide what is and is not a basic human right. But as we have seen, tension often arises in the details of the court's decisions. From these many laws, federal court cases, and nationwide controversies, a question is posed.
Roe v. Wade.
Roe versus Wade.
Roe v. Wade.
Roe v. Wade.
Is the right to privacy a fundamental right?